Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. Let's react to a video from Pearl called Traditionalism is Never Returning. And after that, there's a clip from Jordan Peterson that I wanted to go over. So let's go and watch.
So, what I actually wanted to talk about today, now that I get through my 2 minutes of announcements, is I was thinking about how we're never going back to the 1950s. And TradCons, it's so interesting because I saw this clip of Charlie Kirk, and he said that you should marry young, find a woman, men, marry young, and have a bunch of babies. And I thought to myself, are these commentators out of touch or pandering? I don't know. Is it, because Charlie, I'm like, you realize you were dating not that long ago. You know these women aren't trying to get married at 18 anymore. You know they're not traditional. And I thought to myself, and he was saying it's like because of the population collapse or whatever. And Charlie Kirk got married at 27, so he spent 10 years, building himself up, and then he got married. And in a modern day, when women all want the top guy, that makes way more sense for men. That makes way more sense because women don't want to build a man. Now, I know they used to do that like 50 years ago. I know maybe you can go out into the country and find someone, I'm sure. But guys, even the country women are getting a bit corrupted. They're still going to college in the cities. They're moving to the cities, and these trends aren't going to stop. And I don't say this in a happy way. I was thinking about this. And I was thinking about how in the last 5 years, I am so much more used to seeing naked women. It's so bad. I don't even think twice about it. If I see a girl half naked, it's like I'm just used to it. You go to the beach and there's thongs everywhere. You're just used to it. And the future is going to be more hookers. It's just going to be more sex workers. It's going to be more promiscuity. It's going to be less marriage. And it's not what I want, right? This isn't what Pearl wants. And that's what they always confuse it. They'll always think I'm saying, oh, well, men should just sleep around. And it's interesting. One critique I hear is that men should not sleep with so many women. That's wrong. But women don't tend to want a guy unless he's slept around.
It's interesting to hear, Pearl say that about traditionalism. I think she's probably had some kind of epiphany about this kind of stuff because it seemed like in the beginning of her channel, it was more about shaming the women or kind of espousing the traditional conservative values. And lately you've kind of seen Pearl lock horns with, your Daily Wire types, the Matt Walshes and all these folks, because she's been recently speaking out against the tradcons, which, I agree with her when she says traditionalism is never returning. And in my opinion, we've just had so many changes in technology, like birth control and all these kinds of other changes, to the family law system and all that kind of stuff, that there's just no way we can return to traditionalism. If women are going to pick and choose when to be traditional, then it's just never really going to work out, and now men, especially with the red pill stuff and the manosphere stuff, are basically doing the same thing. They're picking when and when not to be traditional as the answer to feminism for women, basically.
And you can kind of hear it in the guy's voice when he hasn't, because he has no experience with women. He doesn't know how to call out his girl when she's acting up. He doesn't know how to stand up to her. He doesn't know how to lead the relationship. And men can really only get that through experience. Now, I'm not saying that it's morally correct, but these are kind of the new tools that men have to use to adapt. So, you know, now we have to think in 2023, the average chick isn't a virgin. Okay, these don't really exist anymore. I've interviewed over 1,000 women. I think I found maybe 5 and 1, I believe. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're gonna tell these guys, and they'll say go to church. And I thought about when I was super like when I was really involved in this church in Milwaukee for like 2-3 years. I mean, I guess there was one virgin chick, but I mean, she was picky as all hell. I mean, as she should be. But should the average guy like wait around for that? So I just kind of was thinking to myself that, and I think this is sometimes where Rolo gets mad. I know he's not my biggest fan. I love him though. I'm such a fan, but you know. Anyways, because it's like the trad cons can come in and say get married young, but it's only virtue signaling because there's no women to marry. Sorry, Charlie. Like I'm not saying that they don't exist at all, but the odds of the average guy finding one, it's just kind of a needle in a haystack, you know? And there's research that's been done that said when you take out sex work, overweight, too promiscuous, tattoos, all that stuff, only 5% of women are marriageable.
There's no long-term solution that anyone's found. You know, whether you're going to go the I don't know, Andrew Tate route and have all these women and all this kind of stuff, or be this red pill guy, or if you're going to be the tradcon guy, you know, or if you're going to be like the destiny guy in the open marriage. It just seems like marriages and relationships kind of all around don't really seem to have their bearings in this new environment. And it's funny that, you know, she brings up Rolo, because I actually had a back and forth, I guess you could say. He responded to like one of my tweets on Twitter, and I basically said that, you know, the red pill or this whole hyper self-improvement manosphere thing doesn't really provide any long-term solution. It just tells men how to maximize short-term solutions. So it's like you can have a bunch of short-term options, but you can never really long-term invest in any of them, because the minute you long-term invest, which is taking the traditional path with one of those, you know, prospects, they open themselves up to being screwed over by the family courts. They basically become, you know, incredibly vulnerable, and that reality combined with this whole self-improvement narrative is kind of self-defeating, because the higher up in the income hierarchy that you go, in the success, you know, hierarchy, the more you have to lose from a divorce. Choosing a woman who, kind of like Pearl said, I mean, not many of them are virgins and not many of them are marriageable and all these things. The divorce rate's really high, whatever. If you're really, really successful, you know, like one of these manosphere gurus kind of tell you to be, like, just make all this money, be a high value male, quote unquote, and you're going to win. They also don't have the answer. And the reason I believe that is because, you know, I used to work at a child support agency for 5 years, and I saw so many cases cross my desk. And it was almost like the guys who made more money were just punished more for being more successful in society. They got screwed over more. And, you know, we always hear about the high profile cases. I've gone over some of them on my channel.
I mean, that's not, so it's like almost like saying get married young is like virtue signaling. Or men don't sleep around. It's kind of virtue signaling. Now, I understand it's like, it's tough, because if you give this argument, it sounds like you're going against God. And you can't win. Whenever someone brings religion into it, you just can't win. It's like, it's so annoying, because the high value man thing, I tried to have a conversation around that. And what'll happen is you'll say, all right, high value men, you have to make this much amount of money. You have to be wanted by other women. You have to be in shape, whatever, right? And then the religious people will come in and say, oh, but a real high value man has a relationship with God. Well, Diane, how do we measure that? Like, which God? Like, and then it just goes down a rabbit hole, okay? But it's interesting because the trad cons will come in and say, give these women traditional treatment. Treat them traditional. But traditional women don't exist.
They're going to want to have one foot in, one foot out. And this really is the problem with not even just the trad cons, but a lot of the different character types you see in this whole battle. You know what I mean? It's everybody is living in this blurred lines of whatever the modern world is. And we don't have definite lanes and paths for whatever, who you're going to be in life, and at first, this was something that the manosphere loved to talk about with the feminists, because it's like, okay, you want to be a strong, independent woman, but then you also want a man to protect and provide. So they're looking for their cake, and they want to eat it too. You know what I mean? So you got one foot in, one foot out, and you choose to be traditional when you want to be, and you choose to be a feminist when you want to be. And it's the same for the trad con women. You know what I mean? It's like, well, we present ourselves as these very religious people, and we're living the traditional way, but at the same time, I do want to work and have a career and, dress how I want to dress and all these kinds of things, and there's no one really stopping them from that. And there's so many trad con women who initiate divorces and kind of pull all the stuff a woman who's not a trad con does anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And that's kind of to Pearl's point about men not being able to find women who are truly traditional. But even further beyond that is the high value man. The high value man is also someone who wants to live in the blurred lines. We saw this here. So here's Jay Waller and here's Lila Rose. And this was an interesting spat between them where Lila Rose was questioning Jay Waller about stuff, and he got really frazzled. And the reason he got really frazzled is because these, high value man types or whatever like to purport themselves as traditional in one sense, but then also as like red pill, I do whatever I want non-traditionally in another sense. So they're going to say, well, I have all this money from my success and I'm able to protect and provide for a woman, and that's why women like me, and you should try to be high value too for all these kinds of things. But then at the same time, on the other end, it's, well, I'm going to sleep with as many women as I want, even if they're virgins or not virgins, and then sleep with them. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to do anything to try to maintain a relationship. It's all on them. That's essentially the end prescription of Myron Gaines's Why Women Deserve Less book, where at the end, he's basically like, listen, if you become high value, it's all on the woman to maintain the relationship, essentially. So they behave just like the, let's say really attractive woman, feminist or something like that, who's strong and independent, but still wants a man to make more than her. There's really no difference between those characters.
Even the most pure women that I've met on the podcast get way more attention than any woman did in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And no matter how nice of a chick you are, that still changes you. So marriage is going to get older and older. People are going to keep getting married and having kids older. I'm not saying that's what's right, but it's going to be what happens. And so now we're in a time period where the average age of first marriage is 30. And what's also interesting? These guys never know their wives from childhood. I mean, occasionally. I think Michael Knowles did. But they still broke up in college. I'm like, red flag, red flag. You know what I mean? Like, I thought to myself about this. These guys will all talk about the good women that they found, but there's no verifying the women's stories. I mean, most of them met them in their 20s. They were in their 20s. Nothing wrong with that. But is your chick really different than all the other chicks? I doubt it, So it's almost like virtue signaling, because
I think instead of the word virtue signaling, what would work better here is cosplaying, right? Like, there are no true traditional people in our society anymore because our society, first of all, is not set up traditionally. None of the laws are traditional. And well, except for the ones that require a man to continue paying child support for a kid that isn't biologically his once that kid's over age 2 in California and many other states also. I guess that part comes from a traditional chivalrous type notion. But beyond that, it's like what, laws like no fault, being able to just leave a marriage, right, for no reason at all, but because you want to. There's just no such thing as true organic traditional people. There's just people who cosplay as traditional, like in It's Complicated's video with the undercover feminists. They all had the cowboy hats on. They all had the nice, charming Southern accents. Everything was great, super country. But all the women answered his questions in a way that basically betrayed their inner feminists. And they're virtue signaling. They're playing a character, but they're really just cosplaying something. And, they're not really the thing in itself. It's just purporting to be something, but they're really not. And that's why everything's failing.
They'll do, and I guess I've probably done this too, is say, all right, I'll give you an example where I've done it. And I didn't mean it to virtue signal, but when you think about it, if I say, guys, we should ban, If I say, guys, we should ban OnlyFans. Okay, we need to ban it. Well, it's not getting banned. And sex work is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And why is this phone not? Okay. And what are we going to do about it? And even them.
Come on, Pearl. You got a whole studio. But what you should do is put that water bottle like right in the corner of it so it's not covering the camera, and then it'll hold it up.
Say, okay, well, a man should provide. Well, how is a guy going to provide when women are taking their jobs?
Yeah, that was funny. That's funny. That was actually a question that was asked in the undercover feminist episode that I reacted to on this channel. It was from It's Complicated, but I reacted to that video, and I remember the question he asked was, why should men be expected to provide for women if they have to compete with women in the job market? Which is pretty funny.
The guys are like, I'm trying, but they keep giving you guys our jobs. And then the women vote for higher and higher taxes. So now, because of what we've voted for and what we have chosen as women, now I know not every woman's chosen this. I didn't choose it. It was the women before us. But they've told men for 50 years we don't need them. We've taken their jobs. We voted for higher and higher taxes. So now, the average family is going to need 2 parents working. Now, I could virtue signal, right? When I have kids, I'll stay with them. But most people aren't in my financial position.
Yeah, and that's so true. Especially working at the child support office. I saw so many, I guess, broken couples at that point cross my desk. And to survive out here, especially where I'm at in Sacramento, typically both people have to work. And that's just a reality of anyone who's not well-to-do, which honestly, it's going to be most people. Most people aren't in that upper strata, so they don't have the luxury of being able to do that. I agree with her when she says we're not going back to traditionalism. I think traditionalism went away, after birth control happened, because at that point women could control certain things about their bodies that was much more difficult for them to be able to do before. It made sense to be traditional when there were more consequences to certain actions, like having sex with somebody. You might get pregnant. Then what are you going to do, But it's changed since then, and there's new technologies. Like there's DNA tests now, which I think is just as important because that really reveals the true paternity of a child, and that's almost like a nuclear bomb and all this too. But there was another video I actually found that I was watching Coach Greg Adams' channel, Free Agent Lifestyle, and he reacted to it. And it's kind of relevant to this, but it's a clip from Jordan Peterson. And the reason I think it's interesting because it's him is because he works for the Daily Wire, who typically employ the people that Pearl typically locks horns with over these issues. Jordan Peterson had some a surprisingly open mind, I think, on a lot of this stuff, at least in the sense that he's acknowledged that the world is different now. Where I think a lot of the like Matt Walsh's or Ben Shapiro's of the world tend to not acknowledge that as a reality and believe we can go back to traditional living and that that's going to solve the problem. But that's gone. So let's go and watch some of that Jordan Peterson video.
Men in the Me Too age while maintaining healthy boundaries and strong behavioral expectations.
We've had relatively reliable birth control since 1960. Okay, that's not very long. And we underestimate the unbelievable technological triumph of birth control. It's the hydrogen bomb, it's the transistor, like it's a major league transformation in human interaction. Women are now free from involuntary reproduction. That's never been the case in the entire history of the planet. Okay, we don't know exactly what to do about that. Okay, so the first idea in the 60s was, hell, let's party. And you could see why. It's like what the rules for not engaging in promiscuous sexual intercourse seemed to have vanished. So we had a couple of decades of experimentation. It's like, well, how'd that go? Little hard on the family, I would say. That's not so good for kids. AIDS, that wasn't a plus. Could have killed us all. And it mutated, particularly to take advantage of promiscuous sex, because viruses are very tricky things. So it turns out that sex is a little bit more complicated than we thought. Well, it actually turns out that it's a lot more complicated than we think. Okay, and now it's 50, 60 years later, and we're trying to sort this out. It's like, well, when is it okay to have sex? Exactly. And when is it not okay to have sex? And what does it mean that it's okay? And what does consent mean? And the answer to that is, well, we never used to have to think these things through because the rule was don't have sex until you get married. That was the rule. Now that isn't the rule. Okay, so what's the rule? Well, we're not having a conversation about the rule. We're waiting till someone does something that seems like it might be untoward and then mobbing them and trying to extract the rule out that way. And it's not a very effective way of doing it.
There has been these changes in technology, and he mentions birth control, but there's other ones too. Again, there's DNA and paternity testing for men, and that came out in the mid-90s. For the longest time, through all of human history, you weren't really going to be able to know if the kid truly wasn't biologically yours, unless it was just like super obvious looks wise. And most of our family law up until very recently is built off of a world where we didn't have paternity tests. You know what I mean? And in fact, one of the benefits for men to be married was to know that the kids born of that marriage were going to be your children because, well, ostensibly, you guys took a vow in front of everybody and you guys were both like, I do. And then all of society's like, okay, those two are doing it. So the kids that came out of that union are supposed to be yours. And it was also a way of ensuring paternity because if you guys are married, then society knows that is son of whoever these people are. We know who the mom is. That part was obvious, but now we know who dad is. And this is important for things like private property, inheritance, and all these kinds of things. And if there was maybe some fooling around going on, it was a heck of a lot harder to spot, so it made sense. But nowadays, we can prove who the father is without him having to be married to her. And in fact, it takes away one of the benefits of marriage in the first place, or at least one of the purposes of it. And furthermore, it's like we got other technologies too that are weird. We got IVF. I did a video the other day about a subreddit called Single Mothers by Choice. And it's a group of women that they're all on this forum. You can read some of the posts. And what they do is they basically impregnate themselves through a sperm donor, through IVF and all these kinds of methods. and they willfully give birth to a child and take care of the child by themselves, and the child will never have a father because they used a sperm donor, and they did this illegal way so that they can never have to worry about a husband or a father being there. And it's about their challenges and stuff, and it's an interesting subreddit. If you want to watch the video, you can go check it out. But there are all these changes in the landscape out there. So to believe traditionalism is coming back is, I just think, an incredibly naive view to have.
You know, you want to decrease campus rape? That's easy. Get rid of alcohol. No one has that conversation. It's like I did my PhD work on alcohol. 50% of the people who are murdered are drunk, and 50% of the people who kill them are drunk. And almost all the date rape situations are consequences of excess intoxication. But yet there's a party culture on campuses, and anything goes. And you also have this strange thing, especially on the radical left, which is unbelievably paradoxical, where absolutely every form of sexual expression imaginable is 100% permissible because sex is fine, but it's so dangerous that while you're dancing with someone at a Princeton mixer, you have to ask them 2 or 3 times if it's okay for you to continue. And that's actually the case, by the way. I'm not making that up. It's like, well, both of those things can't be true. Now, what's happening, I think, on the Me Too end of things and the affirmative consent end of things is the old sexual taboos are reasserting themselves. Mm-hmm. The idea that we can extract sex out from emotional intimacy, and especially emotional intimacy, I would say, psychological intimacy, maybe even from long-term relationship, I don't believe it's a tenable idea. I don't think we can do it. And a lot of what we're seeing is the backlash against that. It's like, well, I feel used. You know, because one of the things that's happening on the really radical end of the anti-sexual abuse movement is the idea that, well, if you have intercourse with someone and then you regret it the next day, that's evidence that it wasn't consensual. Well, it is, in a sense, evidence that it wasn't consensual because it's evidence that you didn't bloody well think it through, right? It was good for last night, but it's not good for today. It's not very wise. The question is, well, what constitutes consent? And we need to have a very serious conversation about that. Like, under what circumstances is it acceptable to give consent? But we're not mature enough to have that conversation. We want it both ways.
Oh, I miss the old Jordan Peterson. This clip kind of reminded me of Jordan Peterson pre-Daily Wire. You know, I don't really listen to him as much now, but maybe he's not so bad. But it's just, you know, when someone signs up for something like that, and it's like, oh, damn. Now they have to operate within the parameters of, you know, whoever their employer is. And that's what we got here. But I still appreciate this clip a lot because I think hearing it from someone who is, I guess you'd call him a tradcon. Again, he's from the Daily Wire camp, so I classify him that way. But it's nice to hear him acknowledge the changes in the world that we've seen, you know, and Pearly kind of talks about some of that in her video too, you know, how we're not going back to traditionalism. And that makes all the sense in the world for me. It's just, as I worked at child support and I saw case after case after case, that was the conclusion I came to, was that the whole traditional thing, it's more cosplaying. It's not something that's real. It's not the environment we live in. And the rules of the game need to be adjusted to accommodate these new technological changes that have influenced human behavior, you know. So, you know, I personally, the things I'd like to see to try to offer up some solutions to you guys, because it's probably not so nice of me to sit here and outline the problem so much without at least proposing some possible solutions, is we have to look at where the biggest injustices are, you know. And for me, the biggest one's always paternity. With the advent of genetic testing, I think that if a man finds out a child is not biologically his and he already has paternity of the child, typically through marital presumption or through signing paperwork at the hospital, the voluntary declaration of paternity. The man should have first right to dissolve that legal relationship he has with the child. If deep down in his heart he doesn't want to be the father of that child, he should have first right to say, I'm going to relinquish my paternity status of this child, and put it on mom to go down to the child support agency. I mean, it was my job, and we were very efficient and good at it, and say, hey, this is the father of the child, and I want you guys to go after him. And she should be held accountable to that. And we have genetic tests now, so use them to get the right guy. If the guy wants to remain in the child's life, then he can have the right to do so. But taking away his right to say, no, I don't consent to this, is not the right way to go, and that needs to be changed. The second thing also is I think there should be caps on alimony and child support. There's a lot of ridiculous child support orders out there. I do a lot of covering of different celebrity cases of like $20,000 a month in child support. But even for people who aren't celebrities, I've seen a lot of ridiculously high orders. And I think child support should be capped around to whatever the base minimum is of a child's needs, depending on where you are. So if you're in Sacramento and, you know, a place to stay is around $2,000 a month, and typically kids need this much for food or whatever, medical. And let's say typically a kid needs about, let's even go high and say a kid needs $3,000 a month to survive. That should be the cap. And if he has 50% custody, then they'd pay $1,500. But anyways, there should be caps on that. Nextly, custody hearings should be taxpayer funded. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, child support's taxpayer funded. So someone could walk right into a child support agency and get everything done. I don't want to say for free, but on the they don't have to pay anything. Where if you want custody, that's still in the purview of a private family law. The child support agency doesn't handle that. So you have to now pay the courts to hear that. You have to hire an attorney and all these kinds of things. I think there should be an easier pathway for men to take to be able to have a relationship with their child. And I think we as a society can agree that children that have relationships with their fathers are typically better adjusted than if they only have relationships with one parent. So that should be something. I'm not a fan of just giving someone 50-50 custody off the bat. I think it should go based off the history. I think if two people were married and there was no abuse, then 50-50 custody right off the bat is okay, because that's what the standard is. That's what normal is. The kid knows father and has a relationship. But if a kid was born from a one-night stand that mom had while she was on her business trip in Texas with some guy, and that guy never saw the kid, and the kid's 3 now and never met this guy in his life, I think that guy should still be required to go to the court and prove that he is of a certain level before we just put this kid in this guy's house, even if we do start getting him for child support. So that's another thing. And the final thing I'd like to see is, I don't think we can truly go back to at-fault divorce the way it was, because there were problems with at-fault divorce. A lot of people wanted to get divorced. It was clogging up the courts. It took too long. Okay. Second, beyond that was collusion. You had a consent problem. So if both parties wanted to get divorced and they're like, yeah, it's best for us, the courts would not grant that to them unless one or the other party said, okay, I'm guilty of doing something bad, so now the courts can give us the divorce. So you saw a lot of collusion, and you would see couples colluding with each other, attorneys colluding with each other, and even judges colluding with these participants in order to agree that one person did something bad so they can slide the divorce through. So that was why they changed it in the first place. I think a person should still be able to get divorced no fault, but with the change that if you want to leave and the other party has not injured you, cheated on you, abandoned you, cruelty and abuse, these kinds of things, then you should forfeit your claim on the marital asset. So if you want to leave because you're not happy, you can, because we have a consent issue here. If they don't want to be there, they don't want to be there. But if you leave, you don't get any claim on the house. You don't get first dibs on custody. You're forfeiting alimony, and you're not leaving with half the guy's retirement. So those are the change. That's like my my dream changes. If I in Shah's ideal world, it would look that way. And I think that would smooth over a lot of this friction and frustration, and it might even incentivize people to want to get married. A person who is successful and does well should not have to fear getting married to someone that does not make as much money as them. Right now, with our laws basically being 50-50, if you're going to sign that paperwork, I would not advise you to sell it unless the person you're marrying makes as much, if not more money than you. So avoid the paperwork. But anyways, yeah, those were some entertaining videos, and appreciate you if you made it this far. Hit the like button, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. And we'll see you on the next one.